Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Be a Warrior podcast. I am so ecstatic. We are in Limb Loss, Limb Difference Awareness Month. And this year, working on innovations and inventors in our community for our community. This week, third week in, I am so excited to introduce Mr. Monster Mike Schultz, who is not only a husband, a father, he is a Paralympian, an inventor, and an author. So, Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, lots to talk about.
There is a lot. We could talk probably for hours, and I definitely want to make sure that we have you back on as we go through life and things change and we have ebbs and flows. But I just wanted to say thank you, one, for coming on and finding the time. I know you're busy, and being a snowboarder, I know we're getting towards that end of that season, but I think like places like Park City, we're ramping up with snow still, and I get out there and I'm skiing too. I don't snowboard. I wish I did, but if you can just kind of give us a little bit of a update, like, so the first two people that have been on my program, for those who've been listening, know that they were students who created something to better our community, one for pain management, one for adaptive athletes getting into surfing. This week, Mike is an amputee himself, but before he was an amputee, Mike, tell us a little bit about you before the accident.
Yeah, since I was a young teenager, motorsports were my thing. In the summertime, it was motocross, and in the wintertime, it was snowmobile racing. And that's really what grabbed my attention. And I pursued it as far as I could. In 2003 to 2008, I was racing with the best in the world, racing snowcross, and living my dream, making a living, doing what I loved. And in 2008, during a competition, I was thrown from my machine, and I had a really bad hyperextension of my left leg on impact, and compound fractured and damaged nerves, and severed a main artery, and it put me in really bad shape. The doctors tried the best they could to put it all back together, but it was circulation complications and nerve damage forced us to make the really difficult decision to amputate just above the knee system, the knee joint. Yeah, as a top level professional athlete, to hear those words was that was a hard one to take. My wife Sarah, was by my side, who was also a nurse, was a good person to have by my side in that moment, and really helped get me through that and make the decision. And it was apparent that that was kind of the only option forward. So the decision, we talked about it for like 20 minutes. And later that afternoon, they ended up amputating my leg, which kind of changed everything. But, looking back, didn't change a whole lot as far as what my dreams were, and that kind of thing, and how my life continued from there.
How long were you in the hospital with this injury? Like, I'm assuming they took you straight to the hospital. How long were you in the hospital before the amputation?
It was 3 days.
Was it?
So they tried to patch it back together, but it came down to circulation problems with my lower limb. And yeah, the tissue started dying because of circulation problem, and my kidneys started shutting down, and my overall health deteriorated really quickly. And that's more the reason why they chose amputation. Mechanically, they could have possibly patched it together, but the nerve was severed, and like all the tissue in my foot was it was no good. So you had to take it and start over. I
Well, and then
spent a total of 13 days in the hospital. It was
after that, okay.
a really good thing that I was in the best physical condition of my life when that happened. So I was able to rebound fairly quick. The
Yeah.
biggest issue was the phantom pain that I dealt with for a couple months post, which was unbearable at times.
Yeah, and like mine was an elective. I'm an above left side as well, and mine was elected. So I don't know if the phantom pain is different. I have heard from people that have had tragic accidents that there are screaming days of just that pain. And I don't know if that has to do with the trauma, but they say
Yeah,
research says that it does.
talking with a lot of amputees, that is pretty consistent.
Is it?
It kind of depends on how the nerve is severed, and
Got it.
how they're able to place it after the or during the surgery, can be a major factor with that.
Yeah.
It kind of started to subside once I was in my prosthesis, which it kind of took my mind off of thinking about phantom pain. It's a weird thing, because even like when I come up on anniversaries of my injury, it's
Mhm.
so weird. All of a sudden, my phantom pain will come back for like 24 hours, and it's like it's it's so much of it is up here, and
Right.
you're thinking about it, and
Yeah.
nerves are they're a funny thing.
They are, and our mind is really powerful. So, like I always tell people that staying active and being preoccupied with other things helps me. I think that's the reason I have been able to not have those moments. I've only had a few episodes, and that was just because I had a pinched nerve somewhere else that just made my legs scream. But yeah, I think just keeping busy, right? Having
Yeah.
something to do, having hobbies, having something else that draws your attention. Because as soon as your attention goes towards it,
Oh, it just
it
gets worse
talks
and
to
worse
you.
and worse.
Yes, it does. So I have to ask because, like, now when you see, one of the things that I talked to someone about before I became an amputee, because of being elected, I had a choice, right? So I was thinking this through, and I'll never forget. I went up to a complete stranger who was an amputee in our church, and I just said, I don't know why I'm coming up to you, but I just have to tell you that I think I might be having amputation. And I remember him saying, I've had mine since I was a little kid. He goes, if you were telling me you were doing it back when I had mine done, I'd say don't do it if you have a choice. But because of technology today, you're in a great time frame. So back in 2008 versus now, when you're thinking about the athlete you were, the competitor you were, I am what was crossing your mind at that point with like, will I ever get to do anything like this again? I mean, there was definitely not the technology that there is today.
Yeah. Like, through my career, I've been injured a lot, previous to my amputation. And so when this injury happened, I really had the mindset of this is another injury. I have to go step by step in the recovery process. First it was to get my health back after surgery. Then it was to get mobility back, up on my walking leg, which was pretty quick. I was up walking on my first prosthesis 5.5 weeks later. Um, but all that while, I knew I'd be able to get back on a snowmobile and four-wheeler. I thought I was going to have to give up my motocross bike. I didn't know how that was going to work, so I just kind of like, yeah, I should probably just get rid of it and get four wheels instead of two. And then springtime came, and I got on my bike and I'm like, I can figure this out, but realized really quick that, well, I learned how to walk on a Oser Total Knee 2100. So it's the mechanical hinge, um, which works okay if you're on flat surface, um,
Yep.
and does not work on a motocross bike or on a snowmobile. I got on my snowmobile that later that spring, or well, actually it was in February. Um, but the first month or two, I was like, I don't want to race again because I know I'll never be at the speed or even close I was before my injury. So I was like kind of depressed about that. I knew I wanted to recreationally ride,
Yeah.
because I mean, it's one of my favorite things to do.
Right.
But the racing thing, I was like, no, I don't want to be bummed out about how slow I am. But it all changed when I got back on the machines and realized that what really drives me is the challenge of getting faster. And, I accepted that, okay, I'm kind of starting over from zero again, but I'm progressing, and that feels good. And that's the real motivation behind it, is just trying to get better.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And yeah, having that goal, I think that's the difference between those that will succeed once an amputation happens, is having a goal sitting in front of you. It's that carrot in front of you that says, this is where I want to be.
Yeah,
And setting those
absolutely.
strict goals. That's what I learned when I had a couple peer visitations before, was they were goal setters. That's why they were successful.
Yeah, yeah. Short-term and long-term goals are key, because if you set only a long-term goal. It's kind of depressing if you can't get there, but if you set up a step by step, okay, I got to learn how to walk. Okay, I got to figure out the different components that I'm going to need to do a certain thing. And that's where I was kind of at with the riding right away is, yeah, this knee system for everyday use is not going to work. And so I started researching different options, and there was so in 2008 there was two sports knees that I knew of. One was the XT9 and the other was the Bartlett Tenon that Brian Bartlett had recently developed at that time. And I looked at them, and there was a couple shortfalls that weren't going to work for riding motocross or snowmobiles because they just didn't have the flexion range needed to be able to stand up and sit down on the machines. And I'm a garage guy, and so I really understood how they worked. You know, they're using mountain bike shocks in them, or that Bartlett Tenon did, and then XT9 was kind of a custom shock. But it's very similar, and I'm very in tune with suspension components through my years of racing. And I love metal fabrication in my workshop, you know, since I was a little kid. And so I just took all those experiences, and I'm just going to be like, I'm going to build my own. Why not? I know what it needs to do. I've got the tools to do it. And so I went mad scientist for like a month on my drawing board. And the benefit was that it was a really positive thing to keep my mind occupied. Like I was solving my own problem that was going to get me further and give me some options. So I had my first prototype in, let's see, what was it, March, or end of March or early April, you know, just several months after my injury happened.
Seriously. Yeah. Okay. So like, I'm sorry, my brain doesn't work this way. So I sit there and I think I had read your story and I knew more about you. And actually I reached out to you right after my amputation because I was looking for something that I could surf in. And you're like, well, this is great for the lake, but not salt water. And I was like, no,
I
but
know
I'm
that
sitting there
salt
going,
water is
how
hard on
does
stuff.
it? Oh my gosh. I just saw my surf leg the other day and there's rust dried from it from this last surf episode. My question though is like, how does one do that? Like, I can't even wrap my head around the tools, the manufacturing. Like, you don't have an engineer degree, right?
No, I high school drafting class is, you know, where I learned the basics of how to blueprint parts and pencil and paper and rulers and protractors. And that's how it
Oh
all
my.
started. But like I knew, the basis of the design started with, okay, I've got X amount of space to work with, you know, like 15 inches, 20 inches, whatever it was, underneath my socket, 20 inches and 3/4, something like that. But so I've got X amount of space to work with. I know I needed to have a natural range of motion in the knee joint. So that's about 130 degrees. And
Wow.
I knew that a mountain bike shock was the best option for that dampening system and that spring, just because they're a small package and they're
Yeah.
lightweight and there's a lot of adjustment to it. So with those basic three pieces of information is how I started sketching things out. And the unique thing about it was the linkage system that I had to come up with in order to get that full range of motion with only a 2-inch travel shock. So I came
That
up with
is
this roller track system right here. So as the knee flexes, it pushes
that
this roller
pushes
track
in.
down, which compresses the shock. And so
That,
that's
and
the real unique thing about this compared to everything else.
is that what gets the calf area out of the way? Because I can't with my sea leg, I can't get down into a squat because the calf gets in the way, or
Oh,
you know what I
so
mean? Like,
it bottoms out on the back of the socket.
yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah, so
socket and the
that's
calf hit.
yeah. So it's you know, how all this is designed on top of the knee system, in conjunction with the adapters that you use. That's, I mean, not every, depending on the shape of your limb, there can be some limitations, but you can usually, like, a lot of times people will get specific sockets made
Yeah.
if they need additional clearance and use offset
Yeah.
adapters and that kind of thing.
Uh, there you go. I guess it's not really necessary in my line of work. Podcaster, housewife, you know. I just need to get to the gym. I don't do squats with that leg, so it's all right. Well, that's cool. So you came up with the Moto knee and the Versa foot, right?
Yep,
Is
yep.
that
So the
right?
Moto
That's
knee
how it
was
started?
first. Yeah, Moto knee was first. And that first year of competing in motocross, I met a handful of other amputees, and they were all using just everyday equipment. And so my original prototype was pretty bulky looking. You know, it wasn't fit and finish wasn't great, but functionally it worked very well. And I remember showing it off to the other adaptive motocrossers, and they're looking at it like, I think it looks really heavy. I'm like, well, yeah, it's just a prototype. And so they were all questioning it before they saw me ride. And then we get out on the racetrack and things were flowing so good. And yeah, they changed their mind pretty quick. But I realized that there's so many others that could benefit from it. And so I decided to start my company, BioAdapt, the following year with the intent of creating the highest performance lower limb prosthetics for action sports. And the following year, I think 2012 is when I brought out the VersaFoot. And the unique part about it is it also uses a mountain bike shock in the foot system. And it gives a much further range of motion in the ankle, and you can adjust the resistance in it. Depending on, if you're in board sports or motocross, you can change the resistance in it, which, allows it to perform better, as well as, being used as a below knee prosthesis or above knee. When you put the combo of the knee and the foot together, it feels so natural as you're going through that squat motion, jumping up and down.
So so you do motocross still, right?
Yep.
So how does the foot work on, uh, pardon me, I'm really dense when it comes to the motocross, on the pedal or
The foot
the
peg?
stand where you put your foot? How does that, is it just traction? Is there a clip
No,
in
so
or what?
that was just as difficult system to come up with as the knee system. Because like when you're riding moto, you're up in the air, you're leaning over in turns, rough terrain, bouncing around a lot. And so the goal was to come up with a system that would hold my foot in place, but not be fully attached in case I crash. So I came up with an adapter that goes on the foot peg that kind of cups the foot. It's got kind of a half
Oh,
hook over top of it, and then one on the inside or the outside. So as long
yeah,
as I've got weight on it, it stays where it's supposed to. Whether
got
I'm
it.
flying through the air or landing hard off of big jumps. But that took me honestly about a year and a half to figure out, to the point where I didn't have to think about where my foot was at. The other challenge was the shifter, being on the left side. The shift lever is by the left foot peg, and obviously I can't do that. So I put an
Mm,
electronic shifter on it with push buttons, which is pretty sick.
wow. Okay, so all this happened in your garage at your home.
Yep.
That's where it
Yep.
started.
Yep. Lived up in Brainerd, Minnesota, during that time. And yeah, like I said, I just went mad scientist.
That
It
is
was
crazy.
so fun working on a project like that. And it still is. Obviously, I'm still doing it every day, but that excitement, testing something out, going for a ride. The hardest part was, I go test it out and within 2 minutes realize that no, that's not going to work. And then I go back to the
Mhm.
shop, spend another half of a day or more tweaking things or modifying it and starting all over. So it was kind of a roller coaster of emotion for that
I'm
first year and a half.
sure. Well, yeah, especially if things didn't as planned, and then you had to go back to the drawing board. So when you did this, was the ultimate goal for you just to get you back to your peak performance in the sports you loved?
Yeah, originally, like early on, so the spring of 2009, I found out about Summer X Games
Mhm.
has, or that was the second year at that point, have adaptive supercross. So it's amputees and paraplegics racing motocross. And I've been an X Games athlete in the wintertime on snowmobiles since 2002. So I was very in tune with X Games and their program. And when I saw that, it's like, this is my new life goal. And that's what really motivated me to put all the effort into it. And 7 months after my injury happened, I was racing Supercross in LA at the X Games. It was incredible. It scared the
But
hell out of me. It
I'm
did.
sure it was a little surreal. And were you competing then with your prototype, with your
Yeah. Yeah. At that point, so 7 months in, I was on my second version of the prototype.
Okay, you're making all this and you're getting yourself out there. You're obviously then starting to see where the need is, and probably based on already what I know about you, there's no way that you're set with just you being set up. You wanted to start letting other people enjoy what you were enjoying. So how does something like that grow when it's in your garage?
Uh, it was, I mean, the first 2 years, I sold a couple of them, and that all mainly comes back to the coverage I got at X Games. Because a lot of people saw me on TV, and they highlighted my story and build my own leg, and that's how it kind of really started. Um, but what really opened the door was in 2011. I was racing X Games snowmobiles, and I met a military vet named Keith, and he was an adaptive snowboarder for a few years at that point, and he saw me racing snowmobiles, and he's like, "Dude, that's a really cool looking knee. Would it work for snowboarding?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not a snowboarder, but functionally, it has the right actions mechanically." So I went home and learned how to snowboard over the next couple of weeks, just enough to understand, how it would work. Learning a lot, learning at,
Yeah.
almost 30 years old, learning how to snowboard as an amputee.
Mhm.
That, that's a steep learning curve. It hurts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
But
yeah.
I ended up meeting up with Keith in Colorado a couple months later at the end of the season, and he bolted it on, and right off the lift, he is just flying down the mountain. I can't even think about keeping up to him. We get down to the bottom, and his reaction was so powerful. Like, to receive that kind of a reaction with something I created, it was just a really cool moment. And that conversation and meeting with him opened the door for me to start working with Walter Reed. And they had a really cool adaptive sports program that goes out to Colorado once a year, and they invited me to come out and set up everybody, all the vets, on their new bioadapt equipment. So that's kind of what opened the door up for me working with the military side.
So you grew up in Minnesota, or in
Yep.
Minneapolis, or Minnesota, I guess. Did
Yep.
you
Central
did
Minnesota.
you besides being on big machinery, you never skied or anything?
I skied when I was in grade school a little bit, but yeah, as soon as I got, into my teenage years, I was like, I'm going, I need handlebars. I love
And
motorsports, and so that's what
and so
really,
and now you're a Paralympian snowboarder.
yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Well, yeah, when you think about how hard snowboarding is to pick up for anybody, that's not like a skateboarder by nature or something, and then and to do it without a leg. And part of me thinks, and I tell me if I'm wrong, but when I decided, well, you know what's the harm in trying something new? And that's when I started surfing for the first time, was after I lost my leg. You don't have preconceived notions on what it feels like, so you don't
Yeah.
try to get back to the norm, right?
Yeah, which that could be a benefit as well as, a detriment depending on
Yeah.
the situation. But yeah, if you got a lot of bad habits, and then try and learn afterward,
Mhm.
after being an amputee, it can be really frustrating. But if you're
Yeah.
starting from zero, you don't have nothing to compare it to. So it can be sometimes easier to learn, or easier to accept the difficulty.
Yes. Yes. Well, yeah, right, exactly. It's like, well, I'm missing a leg. Of course it's gonna be harder. So, is there any difference between the that leg and foot for a snowboarder, or is it the same foot? It's just how does it connect with the snowboard?
Yeah, so the foot for snowboarding, I've tested a lot of different things, different types of shoes and boots, but
Mhm.
I found out it works best to go back to a standard snowboard boot and modify the liner to fit the foot a little better,
Oh, okay.
to give it a little more space to move at the ankle.
Mhm.
Um, and like, I tried direct connection options with a binding system, but the practicality of having something so unique or custom, it's just difficult because everybody's foot size is different and they have different riding styles. And so a lot of people ask me that same question is, well, why don't you just directly connect to the snowboard with a hard binding
Right.
or something? It's like, well, when you're snowboarding, depending on the terrain you're riding, and you're eventually going to crash and get all twisted up. It's like, if you're have too much of a positive connection to the snowboard, something's going to bend or break. So I mean, snowboard boots and snowboard bindings work extremely well together. So in that case, I didn't think it was really necessary to reinvent the wheel, so to speak.
Yeah,
And when you're walking around in the snow and you have a little itty bitty foot, it doesn't really
true.
work very well. So, the combination of the performance and just the practical use of walking around a ski and snowboard resort, is a factor.
Right.
So sometimes it's easier just to keep things simple.
Right. And am I wrong in thinking, did I see that you have a direct connect for skiing?
For skiing, yeah. Yeah,
You
that
do.
was yeah, that's actually right here.
Yeah.
So the I actually built this foot before the VersaFoot. I learned how to ski before snowboarding, a
Okay.
year out. And the first time I tried to put a prosthetic foot in a ski boot, I'm like, no, this this is too
They're bad
difficult.
enough. I mean, my
Oh
goodness,
man,
there's no
it's so
give.
hard. I had like pry
Right.
bars and hammers, and I was like, you finally get it in. And I'm like, and now how the heck do you get it
And,
out? So
well, and
like,
you're exhausted by then.
yeah, and just the weight of a ski boot. I mean, snowboard boots are
God.
really light compared to a ski boot, so that's why I went that direction. And it is already a positive connection or a solid connection within the binding. So I mean, it was so much easier because all the pieces were there basically.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to get your intake on this, the input on this, because I ski. I chose right off the bat. The first time I skied, I didn't even have my prosthetic yet. I had just healed, stitches were out. I was waiting for mine. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to ski without my leg. And my husband was like, well, maybe you should mono ski so you're on the ground and it's not as dangerous. And I'm like, if I'm going to get back to skiing, I'm going to look like I'm skiing.
Yeah.
That was my pride get in the way, but it worked. It's exhausting. It's
Yeah.
hard, but I got it.
So were you
I
using
was
the
told
outriggers?
I doing the outriggers, yep. And so that's great. It's a great upper body. It's a full body workout.
Yeah.
But I find I ski better now because I don't have to keep two skis together, which I was always horrible at. So now I don't have to worry about that. But I have heard contradictory statements. I've had some adaptive coaches, like in Park City that I've talked to say, for an above knee, you shouldn't be trying to ski with your prosthetic on because it's all hip action. You don't have the same kind of control. What did you skied obviously with your foot in and you're an above knee? And I know it's not your thing, but is that a possibility or is that just asking for a lot of trouble keeping a
Um,
leg with above knees?
it there's multiple variables there. If, for example, if your limb is really short, it highly reduces control you have. But if you have a full length upper or, like a femur,
Femur? Mhm.
I'm gonna say go to skiing for sure.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's difficult, but just think of the forces you're putting onto your only one good knee. And
Mhm.
like if you ski a lot, I mean that definitely is a long-term issue.
Yeah,
Or I would see it as a long-term issue. And for me personally, I love to do things normal. Like I don't want to modify things. I don't want to, be in a wheelchair unless I absolutely have to. I don't want to
right, right.
not wear a prosthesis unless there's a real reason for it. And I
Yeah.
build this cool stuff, so I want to see everybody using it.
Right. No, that's true. I get that. I feel like I'd have zero control and my fear would be just having that flopping around, even though it is harder, but it's kind of badass to be out there on one ski and people
It is
I
very
mean,
much so.
there's not a lot of people out there doing it unless you like I said, I really learned at Park City. They were amazing at their adaptive program teaching me. And now I'm able to go out just with my husband, my family. I mean, when you're talking about the end goal, I watched for 5 years of surgeries, watching my kids grow up and go up on ski lifts with my husband and leaving me back because I
Mm.
couldn't do it. And to lose it, that was the ultimate goal was that's what we're going to do. My husband taught me when we were 17, he taught me how to ski. I'd never skied before. And so that our goal was, oh, retire someday and just ski. And then this happened. And I'm like, I didn't know if I'd ever get out there. So
Yeah.
I fear putting another ski next to that one, thinking they're probably going to just do a weird, weird
Oh,
thing. But
it depends on the terrain. I mean, when it's smooth
yeah,
groomers, I wouldn't
yeah,
say it's easy to learn, but it's very possible. And like the other benefit is like when you're skating around down by the lifts, or going over catwalks and slow speeds. It's like being able to have 2 feet to stand on. I mean, it is
Tell me about it.
so much less fatiguing as,
Tell me about it.
balancing on one leg and your outriggers.
I say
I mean,
it's
I've
like
never
being
tried
in.
3 tracking, so I don't know for sure, but that's just my assumption.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'll be doing that when I'm like 60 or so, but you never know. Well, I shouldn't say that. That's not that far off, unfortunately, which is frightening. But I say it's being in like the longest wall squat you could possibly be in, and they teach you to breathe and stand during turns and stuff after your turn. But there's times it's just screaming. And usually the only time I ever fall is when I'm at the very end and I'm coming in. I'm like, oh, thank God I'm down. And then I just start to slow down and I go boom, and I just fall over. And like seriously, you couldn't wipe out cool up on the slopes. You're wiping out while you're right in front of everybody having a beer.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's where I usually bite it. Okay, so we're getting back to this. We've got our amazing creation here, your invention, which just blows my mind that someone can think about doing this with the parts that they've got and welding, I'm sure. And I just can't even get my head around it. But where are you at now in production? Is everything still from your home? Is it still handmade by you and some other people? Do you have a large employee staff? What does it look like there?
Well, so we've got 2 full-time employees, me and my wife, Sarah. And then I have a part-time engineer and a part-time business manager. And so yeah, we're skeleton crew. We prototype, design, and assemble everything here at my shop, at my house. And then we have a couple of machine shops that actually manufacture the parts. And all those shops are right here in Minnesota. And so we try and keep as much things as possible close to home. Um,
Nice.
so yeah, we're lean, mean, small business. And it's pretty incredible, like, to see the amputee community like on social media, which has been such a powerful thing for our community. When you're doing certain searches, like for example, hashtag adaptive sports or
Right.
adaptive motocross, adaptive snowboarding, like it just brings you together to learn so much. And when we're cruising through social media and seeing all these athletes from around the world, snowboarding or skiing or riding moto or sport bike or riding horse, and see that they're wearing our equipment, it's like the most proud feeling ever. At the Paralympic Games in 2022, there was 26 athletes from 13 countries competing on equipment I built right in the room back there. And
Yeah.
many of them are my direct competitors. So that's kind of a unique situation that I'm in. But yeah, it kind of stinks getting beat by somebody when you know that you created equipment that makes them faster. But it's the bigger picture is what I'm all about. And like, if I can use my experiences to help others achieve more, I mean, that's worth gold all day long.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me where you're at now with what are your goals for the company? Where do you see this going and what do you want from it? I mean, do you want it to grow bigger or do you want to keep it your family
Uh,
grown?
that's a complicated question. We're kind of at a point now to where we could either stay the same as what we are, or maybe take another step and increase the products that we build, and just get out there more with a real marketing strategy, and continue development on other products, and maybe more for everyday use. That's one option, and that's what we're considering a little bit. But it's kind of hard right now as I'm still an athlete,
Yeah,
competing
I
at the
understand.
highest level in the Paralympics. To juggle both of those things is kind of hard. So it puts limits on both of them. So, we're not going to make any big changes until after 2026. If,
Right.
if we make a change or not, but nothing's going to be decided
Right.
until after the next games in Italy.
Well, yeah, I would guess that the balance has to be between work and doing what you love and what you're able to do right now at this stage in life. Yeah. And
Yeah,
if you're still
absolutely.
that
That is
athlete,
that
yeah,
is the biggest challenge that we have, is
yeah.
like, how do I divide my time up and get the most out of both avenues, being an athlete and a business owner.
Well, and I'm thinking, I had read somewhere. Oh, I was looking at one of your social media posts recently, which I just loved, because of where you're at. You live on like a big ranch area, so like
Yeah,
your
we got,
morning rituals.
oh, what's that?
What's your morning rituals like?
Have a small breakfast, take my daughter to school. We drive her to school every day. It's about 15 minutes away, and then I come back and plop my butt down right here and go through emails for the first couple hours of the day. And then typically in
Do
the afternoon, I'm in back assembling equipment, getting ready to ship out.
Yeah. And then you have horses. I've seen that. So and that's a question I have for you. I have done adaptive riding. Um, there's two trains of thought on that too. Your leg on, your leg off. Do you leg
Yeah.
on?
Honestly, the horseback riding, my wife Sarah's been into horses like since she was 2 years old. Um, but I kind of put up with them, because Sarah had a couple of horses while we were together the whole time. And, I'd ride once or twice a year. I grew up riding horses with my cousin. So, I was very familiar with it. But it was like, I'm not going to get bucked off a horse and get hurt and not be able to go racing on the weekend. But after I became an amputee, I wanted to start some new things and went horseback riding and realized that I love being outdoors in the woods, hiking on trails
Mhm.
and stuff, and I can't really do that as easy as an AK amputee. And so that, went for a ride a couple times. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna buy a horse. And once I did that, it became we're full on in, and we got 7 horses now, and I actually spend more time on the horses than I do anything else in the summertime.
Yeah.
There's something so cool about it and relaxing and still exciting. Like we do some exciting events and stuff. Nothing crazy serious, but I like to go fast on my horse and ride with a purpose
That's
is what I tell Sarah all the time.
yeah. That's not a surprise.
And
Speed's the
I
name.
actually
Yeah.
just got myself in a predicament here about a month ago. It was unseasonably warm here in Minnesota, and we're like,
Mhm.
we're gonna go for a ride. And the horses are a little more spicy in the springtime, being cooped up and not doing a whole lot in the winter. And so I went for a ride, and I got thrown. He got a little huckabucky and threw me down, and I actually broke 3 ribs. And
No kidding.
so yeah, so I was out. I missed my last few World Cup snowboard events on the injured list, so that
Well,
wasn't cool.
I was wondering because weren't you out with Noah? Were they in Europe doing
Well, yeah. So my last trip was Italy, and that was what was that? March, early March, I think it was.
Mhm.
And then the team was up in Canada for a couple weeks. There was
That's
actually 2 different venues and 4 World Cups, and yeah, I missed out on all of them, and I was just I was not a
yeah,
happy
I'm used
person.
to seeing you guys all together, and I'm like, wait, Mike's not been in there. I wonder what he's doing. So that
Yeah,
would
I
explain
was thinking
that.
about making a post about it, but I'm like, you know what? Nobody needs to know that I'm injured right now, unless they need to.
Well, there you go. You have it here, folks. We got through that, and it takes a while, right? With the ribs, the broken ribs.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, the first week is horrible. But
yeah.
after that, it kind of starts to mellow out a little bit. And I was actually out in Colorado last weekend, for a big fundraising event, and got back on the snowboard and got my smile back.
Excellent, excellent. So when is the next competition for you?
It won't start up until November. So our season's all done. Our last
Okay,
event was in Colorado as our team fundraiser. So we'll have a couple training camps over the course of the summer with the snowboard team. And then
okay.
the World Cup tour starts in late November over in Europe.
So are you only competing as a snowboarder right now?
Yep. Yeah, it's I'll ride a little bit of motocross in the summer, but just practicing just to keep my skills up.
Mhm.
And a lot of mountain biking. And then there's a possibility we'll go to the southern hemisphere in fall to get on snow down in Chile or New Zealand or something like that.
That's cool.
But we'll
That's
see.
really
I usually don't go on those trips in the fall until the year of the games, just because the fall I'm catching up with everything before the season starts.
yeah.
But these next 2 years are a little bit different as we ramp up to the games.
Okay. And so with your leg now, can anybody buy it? Is there any insurance tie-ins or is it straight purchase? Tell us where we can go if we want to explore this option.
Yeah, so we sell through prosthetic clinics. We don't do any direct sales to amputees, just because I don't have the bandwidth to set it up for everybody, and I can't just send it to them in a box because it's, making sure you have the right adapters and alignment proper. It's I work direct with a few athletes from around the world, but that's a little bit different situation. So it's like, if you're interested in, go to our website, biodaptinc.com, and share our contact info and any info that you come up with on our website, share it with your prosthetist, and then they can reach out to me and figure out the next steps. Fortunately, it is getting more common for insurance to cover the foot. The knee system is a little bit tougher simply because it's such a purpose-built sports knee. It's not something you can use every day. It doesn't walk well because it has a spring in it. So it's always in full extension until you put your weight into it. So it doesn't swing like a normal walking knee does. So
Got it.
you kind of have to peg leg it. So yeah, the VersaFoot is becoming more common. We don't label it as an everyday prosthetic foot, but there are a lot of people that like to wear it every day just because of its comfort and adjustability. And for that reason, insurance has opened the door up a little bit for it, but it still comes down to how your prosthetist explains how you need it and why. So that conversation is between the prosthetist and the insurance company.
Yeah, and that is right now like still the biggest thing, right? Like people, I mean, I was denied just even my sea leg.
Yeah, it's
So
uphill
that was
battle when you want to
it
get
is.
something that's good.
And you see a lot of people that will say okay to that no, because the insurance company's first response is no to something that
Yeah.
expensive, right? Anything. But you're like, that's my living, right? And the running blade, a lot of people want to run, which you'd think would be more common, but it's still a fight. And so with your leg, I just was curious about that because you'd have to have the prosthetist explain it
Yeah.
to a T on why it's necessary. Because if it's a want versus a need,
Yeah.
it's
And
a
there's
different
there's
game.
currently legislation going through state by state that is opening that up. So additional prosthetic components are going to be covered by insurance. I think there's 4 states that are opening that up. Minnesota, they actually just had big meetings at the Capitol here within the last few weeks, and it's looking very promising. So it opened. I don't know all the details within it, but basically it opens the door for multiple prosthetic components being covered by insurance for different specific purposes.
Wow. That's
So
awesome.
it's a slow process that's been coming, but I wish it was faster as an amputee and as a manufacturer of prosthetic components, but
Sure.
it's slowly getting to a better place.
Yeah. Well, it would be nice to get the right equipment into the hands of more than just Olympians. Like
Yeah,
the
absolutely. I
average
mean,
person that wants to live healthy, wants to be able to do and live, you know?
yeah, absolutely. It's like the most healthy thing you can do is just be active in as many different things as you can. And if you don't have the right components for it, it's really limiting, and it's, not allowing you to live to your potential.
Exactly. And that's what we all need right now. All right. So your book, you have a book. We're going to kind of bring this into full swing here. Driven to Ride, correct?
Driven to Ride. Yeah.
That is okay. So like you don't have enough going on with being a family man, a entrepreneur, an athlete at the highest level, and now you're an author. So what's the book all about? When did that come out? Where can
Yeah.
we get it?
So the book covers a 10-year period of right before my accident happened, and then ends with the story at Pyeongchang Paralympic Games in 2018 when I won gold and silver. That last year, 2018, I'm like, man, this has been such a journey, with the accident and creating the components and building my company and doing so many different things. I mean, I'm a 10-time X Games gold medalist in 3 different sports. And it's like, I need to write this down. Like, I want
Yeah.
my story written so it's always there for my family, my friends, and like being able to share my experiences to help other people going through similar situations.
Mhm.
And it was a challenge that I wanted to pursue to see if I could do it. And it was almost a 3-year process. I worked with co-writer, co-author Matt Higgins from New York, who I met at X Games, several years previous to that. He was a reporter, and he did a bunch of interviews with me through my pro career. And so he worked out phenomenally. He was able to, take my words and really put them down on the pages in a great way with good emotion. And yeah, many, many hours of phone calls and talks with him, laying my story out there. And, it was like a year and a half editing process. And then finally we got a publisher that wanted it. And yeah, it was one of the coolest things ever to hold the first copy in my hand. It was
I'm
a pretty
sure.
amazing feeling.
Could you have even imagined this in 2007 or right before 2008
No,
after
no.
this?
I was so like laser focused on just racing only. That's all that mattered in the world. And when my injury happened, it really opened my mind up to, hey, there's so much more to life than being an athlete, which I mean, that is still my true passion, but it made me realize that there's so many other things that I should be putting a little bit of time into.
Would you go back and do it all the same?
I
If if
would. I
if the
mean,
cards fell the way they did, would you do everything the same way?
yeah, there's been no regrets. And one of the questions that I get asked a lot of amputees do, is like, if you
Mhm.
could get your leg back, would you take it back? And that, the further out we get from it, the more difficult the
Mhm.
conversation is. But hell yeah, I want my leg back. I don't,
Yeah,
I would, I know I would be doing amazing things. I wouldn't be involved in this community, which, I wouldn't be involved with so many great things, but I know
yeah.
I'd be doing very well. But, I got to think about it a little bit, because I've had some incredible opportunities that would have never, been there if I wasn't an amputee. But I just say I'm rolling with it the best I can and making the most of every opportunity that shows itself.
And I can see it. I mean, if you've talked to enough people, you can kind of tell what makes someone successful. What do you think is what pushes you? What makes you successful? What can other amputees that are really struggling right now take from you and your story? Because it always looks like it's all glamour, like everything's been great. What they don't see is all those moments that you're not going to talk about all the time. But what is it that makes someone successful when we go through a path like this where it can be just really disabling for most people?
Yeah, it is hard. For me personally, my drive is just the challenge of getting better. Like that went all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. It's like
Yep.
the type of person I am, I want to keep progressing no matter what it is. And that's really what fuels me. But, I think the best thing that somebody can take from my story or so many others is like
Mhm.
finding that one thing that you're really excited about. And hopefully that has to do with activity, because sports, an outdoor activity, because it it makes you so much stronger mentally and physically all at the same time. It's like, when, like, say you want to take on a new sport like snowboarding,
Mhm.
you have to embrace the challenge of it. If you don't embrace the challenge, then you're going to beat yourself up and you're going to be frustrated. But you have to go
Yeah.
into it looking like, I know this is going to be difficult. This is where I could be, and these are the steps that I need to get there. And you just have to accept that and revisit it through the process, because on your way up, yeah, you're going to get beat up mentally and probably
Mhm.
physically, but you have to understand that going in. And for me, sports all around, like I love the challenge of learning something new or trying to become better. And I think 90% of people are wired that way, but they don't really understand it and how to utilize it or make the most of it. So embrace
Yeah,
the
no,
challenge.
yep, no, I agree with that. And I think the only way to really mold yourself and get better is to go through the character building that this journey takes you through.
Yeah, I know so many amputees that are doing incredible things, whether it's sports or, in the media doing different TV shows or whatever. But it's like, it's such a process. It doesn't just happen. And you have to understand that it's going to take a lot of work no matter what. And the more times you fall down and pick yourself up, the stronger you become. I mean, it sounds cliche and obvious, but there's so much truth to that. And that's why so many amputees do well, because they've been beaten up, but they just get back up.
Yeah, resilience. Yeah, building that resilience. Well, Mike, this has been phenomenal. I mean, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Love seeing the leg up close. I may have to revisit with my prosthetist what I can be doing with
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Let me know if you want to try it out.
I would
You
love to
said you're
try
in
it out.
Utah?
No, we're Arizona.
Oh, Arizona. Okay.
Yeah. So, I try to get out and do water sports. I think it's kind of funny because I ski one leg, did a water sport event where, again, leg was off. I'm going to try to, do a 1 foot and do some water skiing. And my husband was having a panic attack. I swear. He was so worried I was going to hurt myself. I'm like, you do know that I've been wiped out by people coming up behind me skiing. That's painful. But he was so worried about that. But it was really cool to get back in the water. There's something very healing about the water. My 2 healing points is literally the water and horses. So I do a lot of equine therapy here, and that's kind of my passion and my drive to help others with equine therapy. And so, yeah, I like getting on the water. We don't get to saltwater too often, but believe it or not, we have some water here in Arizona. We do. It's not
Well,
all
if
there.
you want to, give it a try, just reach out. I mean,
Definitely
wakeboarding,
will.
let me tell you, wakeboarding is so much easier than like trying to two ski on water skis. If you're
Is
ever
it?
interested in it, I'm happy
Oh,
to help out.
definitely. Well, I saw you guys were all trying out. I saw Noah trying out the leg and wakeboarding way back when I was first
Oh,
seeing
sure.
the opportunities, and I'm like, oh, can I surf with this? And you're like, no, salt water is not good. I'm like,
Yeah, surf behind a boat.
but yeah, I know exactly. Surf behind a boat. I mean, I have to try that one. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for your time. Thank you for your ingenuity and bringing people closer to being athletic and reaching goals and more power to you. Keep going forward, and we look forward to seeing how successful you become in the future with your athletic journey and your snowboarding and the team. And so, good luck to you. Best wishes.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, this
Thank
chat
you
was
for
great.
It was. Thank you so much. Have a great week.
All right, you too.
All right.